A German shepherd stood frozen in the snow, his golden fur crusted with ice. The rope around his neck had worn raw his skin. Once bright amber eyes now stared dull and hopeless across the empty road. He'd stopped barking days ago, stopped expecting rescue. Then, headlights. A car door slammed. For the first time in weeks, warm hands touched his frozen coat. "Easy, boy," a woman's voice whispered. The shepherd lifted his head. Hope had finally come. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe this channel and like this video for more stories like this one. Emily Carter gripped the steering wheel tightly as her car crawled along the frozen road. The heater was turned up as high as possible, but the bitter winter cold still crept inside, making her shiver. Outside, the temperature showed -4 degrees Celsius on the dashboard. The road ahead was empty and silent, lined with tall trees heavy with snow. Her eyes stayed focused on the slippery road, careful not to lose control on the ice. Suddenly, something moved at the edge of the trees, a dark shadow against the pure white snow. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She pressed the brakes gently, slowing the car to a stop. Rolling down her window, she squinted through the falling snow. Her headlights shone forward, lighting up the area. That's when she saw it. A large dog, a German shepherd, tied tightly to a tree with a thick rope. His fur was covered in snow, his body trembling weakly. He wasn't moving much, just barely lifting his head as if trying to stay alive. Emily's stomach twisted in horror. Who would leave a dog like this in the freezing cold? Without thinking, she threw open her car door and stepped out into the icy wind. The cold air hit her face like a slap, but she didn't care. She hurried toward the dog, her boots sinking into the deep snow. As she got closer, she could see how bad his condition was. His golden brown fur was matted and frozen, his ribs visible under his thin coat. The rope around his neck was pulled so tight that it dug into his skin. "Hey, boy," Emily whispered, her voice shaking. The dog lifted his head slightly, his eyes dull and tired. He let out a weak whimper, as if begging for help. Emily's hands trembled as she reached for the rope. It was frozen stiff, impossible to untie with just her fingers. She pulled at it desperately, but it wouldn't budge. The dog whimpered again, his breathing shallow. Panic rose in Emily's chest. She had to get him free, fast. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her car keys. Using the sharp edge, she scraped at the ice around the knot, chipping away at it, bit by bit. Her fingers burned from the cold, but she didn't stop. Finally, after what felt like forever, the rope loosened. The moment the knot gave way, the dog collapsed into the snow, too weak to stand. Emily didn't hesitate. She wrapped her coat around him and lifted him carefully into her arms. He was lighter than she expected. Too light. "Hold on, boy," she whispered as she carried him to the car. "I'm getting you out of here." She placed him gently on the passenger seat, then jumped into the driver's side. Turning the heater up as high as it would go, she sped down the road toward the nearest vet. In the seat beside her, the dog let out a soft sigh. As if he knew he was finally safe, Emily's heart pounded as she saw the suffering dog. Without a second thought, her body moved before her mind could process. Her foot slammed on the brakes so hard, the car skidded slightly on the icy road. Before the vehicle even came to a complete stop, she had unbuckled her seatbelt and thrown open the door. The freezing winter air hit her like a wall, stealing her breath for a moment, but she pushed forward. Snow crunched under her boots as she ran toward the tree where the German shepherd was tied. Each step felt urgent, desperate. The cold burned her lungs with every gasp of air, But she didn't slow down. As she reached the dog, the full horror became clear. His once beautiful golden brown fur was now a mess of ice and snow, clumped together in frozen patches. The thick rope around his neck had become one solid piece with the freezing temperatures, biting cruelly into his skin. His breathing was shallow, each small puff of air visible in the cold. His eyes, barely open, looked at her with exhaustion and pain. Emily dropped to her knees in the snow, her hands immediately going to the frozen rope. "No, no, no," she repeated, her voice shaking almost as much as her hands. She pulled at the knot, but it might as well have been made of steel. The ice had turned it into an unbreakable trap. Her fingers were already turning red from the cold, but she refused to give up. Then she remembered her keys. Fishing them from her pocket, she used the sharpest edge to chip away at the ice around the knot. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Each movement sent jolts of pain through her frozen fingers, but she kept going. The dog whimpered weakly beneath her, his body shivering uncontrollably. "I'm getting you out of here," Emily promised between gritted teeth. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she heard it, a small cracking sound as the ice began to give way. One more hard scrape, and suddenly the rope loosened enough to slip over the dog's head. The moment he was free, all his remaining strength seemed to leave him. His legs gave out, and he collapsed into the snow, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Emily didn't hesitate. She scooped him up in her arms, his cold body feeling frighteningly light. "Hold on, boy," she whispered as she carried him back to the car. "Just hold on a little longer." Her breath came in white puffs as she struggled through the snow, the dog's weak heartbeat against her chest, the only thing keeping her moving forward. Every step was a battle against the cold, against time, against whoever could do something so cruel. As she reached the car, she made a silent promise to the shivering dog in her arms. No matter what it took, she would make sure he survived this. Emily quickly shrugged off her thick winter coat, the cold air immediately biting through her sweater. She carefully wrapped the trembling German Shepherd in the warm fabric, making sure to cover his frozen paws. As she lifted him, she could feel how frighteningly light he was, his ribs pressing sharply against her arms through the layers. His body felt like an ice block against her chest, and his heartbeat was so faint she could barely detect it. "Stay with me, boy," she murmured, her breath forming white clouds in the freezing air. She adjusted her grip and hurried toward the car, her boots slipping on the icy ground. The dog didn't struggle, a bad sign that worried Emily even more. She gently placed him on the passenger seat, buckling the seatbelt around the bundled coat to keep him secure. His dull eyes watched her weakly as she jumped into the driver's seat. The car's interior was already losing heat, so she cranked the heater to maximum, directing all the vents toward her shivering passenger. With a deep breath, Emily slammed her foot on the accelerator. The tires spun for a heart-stopping moment before gripping the icy road. The dashboard clock read 3:47 p.m. She had maybe 15 minutes to reach the nearest veterinary clinic before it closed. The car fishtailed slightly as she took a turn too fast. Emily white-knuckled the steering wheel, her eyes constantly darting between the treacherous road and the suffering dog beside her. His breathing was shallow and uneven, each exhale a soft whine that tore at Emily's heart. "Hold on, just hold on," she repeated, more to herself than the dog. She reached over with one hand to stroke his head, feeling how cold his nose and ears still were. The heater was blasting, but she knew hypothermia could be deadly even once out of the cold. The road conditions worsened as snow began falling heavier. Emily turned on her hazard lights and leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. Every red light seemed to last an eternity. She considered running them, but knew an accident wouldn't help either of them. A weak movement caught her attention. The dog had lifted his head slightly, his nose twitching. Emily's throat tightened. "That's it, fighter," she encouraged. "Just a little further." The clinic's familiar sign finally appeared in the distance. Emily didn't even bother parking properly. She skidded into the first available spot near the entrance. Without shutting off the engine, she unbuckled the dog and gathered him into her arms again. His weight felt even lighter now, his breathing more labored. Emily kicked her car door open and ran toward the clinic's entrance, her boots slipping on the icy pavement. "Hang in there," she whispered into his frozen fur. "You're safe now." As the automatic door slid open, Emily's voice broke as she called for help, her arms aching from carrying her precious cargo. The dog gave one last weak whimper before going still in her arms, his fate now in the hands of the veterinary team rushing toward them. The automatic doors whooshed open as Emily stumbled into the clinic's bright waiting area. Her arms ached from carrying the lifeless German Shepherd, his frozen fur now damp against her sweater. A young receptionist gasped when she saw them, immediately pressing a button under her desk. "Code Blue, emergency!" Her voice crackled over the clinic's speakers. Within seconds, Dr. Harris came rushing through the swinging doors, his white coat flapping behind him. His experienced eyes took in the situation instantly. The dog's blue-tinged gums, the ice still clinging to his paws, the way his body hung completely limp in Emily's arms. Hypothermia. Severe dehydration. Dr. Harris barked to his team already assembling behind him. "Get the warming pads and IV fluids ready. We need to bring his temperature up now." A vet tech gently took the dog from Emily's shaking arms. She wanted to protest, to keep holding him, but her numb fingers wouldn't cooperate. The sudden emptiness in her arms made her stomach twist into painful knots. Through the treatment room window, Emily watched the team work with urgent precision. They wrapped the unconscious shepherd in special heated blankets, started an IV in his front leg, and placed an oxygen mask over his muzzle. Machines beeped and monitors flashed numbers Emily didn't understand. One of the vet assistants kept rubbing the dog's chest vigorously. "Come on, big guy," Emily heard her murmur. "You can do this." The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silent waiting area. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Emily's nails dug into her palms as she stared unblinking at the treatment room. Finally, after what felt like hours, Dr. Harris pushed through the doors, removing his surgical cap. His face was grim, but not hopeless. "He's alive, but barely," the vet said, wiping his forehead. "His core temperature was dangerously low. We found signs of prolonged malnutrition, too." He shook his head, anger flashing in his eyes. Whoever did this didn't just abandon him. They left him to die slowly. Emily's vision blurred with hot tears. The image of that frozen rope cutting into the dog's neck flashed in her mind. She opened her mouth but found she couldn't speak, past the lump in her throat. Dr. Harris placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "He's not out of danger yet, but he's fighting. That's a good sign." He studied Emily's face. "Do you know anything about his history?" Emily shook her head, finally finding her voice. "I just found him like that, tied to a tree in the snow." Her hands clenched again. "How could anyone?" The vet sighed heavily. I wish I could tell you this was unusual, but we see this too often. He glanced back at the treatment room, where the German Shepherd lay motionless under warming lights. What matters now is giving him a reason to keep fighting. Emily nodded, wiping her cheeks. She knew exactly what that reason would be. The scanner beeped as Dr. Harris passed it over the German Shepherd's shoulder. A small green light flashed on the screen. Got it, the vet murmured. There's a microchip. Emily leaned forward, her heart pounding. After 3 days of intensive care, the dog they'd been calling Buddy finally had a chance to be identified. The machine processed the data with a quiet whir. Registered name, Max. Age, approximately 4 years. Dr. Harris read from the screen. His expression darkened as he scrolled further. Owner, Mr. Daniel Blackwell. Local address, the Ridgeview Estate. Emily's breath caught. Ridgeview was the wealthiest neighborhood in town. The Blackwell family owned several businesses and were prominent community members. Dr. Harris exchanged a look with his assistant before picking up the phone. I'm required to notify the registered owner, he explained to Emily, though his tone suggested he didn't like the idea either. The call connected after several rings. Dr. Harris put it on speaker. Mr. Blackwell, this is Dr. Harris from Pine Creek Veterinary. We have your dog Max. He was found in serious condition. That dog was weak, a cold voice interrupted. Useless as a guard dog. I don't want him back. Emily's nails dug into her palms. The German Shepherd in the recovery kennel lifted his head at the sound of his name, his ears twitching weakly. Dr. Harris tried again. Sir, your dog nearly died from exposure. This could be considered. I said I don't want him. Blackwell snapped. Do whatever you want with that mutt. The line went dead. The clinic fell silent. Max whimpered softly, as if he'd understood. Emily moved to his kennel without thinking, slipping her fingers through the bars to stroke his head. His golden eyes met hers, filled with a quiet sadness that broke her heart. Then he's mine now, Emily declared, her voice stronger than she felt. Dr. Harris nodded slowly. I'll need you to sign some paperwork, but yes, he needs someone who will actually care for him. He gestured to Max's still bandaged neck. It'll be a long recovery. The rope burns were deep, and he's significantly underweight. Emily didn't hesitate. She opened the kennel door and knelt beside Max. The dog studied her for a long moment before slowly, carefully resting his head in her lap. A single tear slipped down Emily's cheek as she stroked his ears. You're safe now, Max, she whispered. No one will ever hurt you again. The German Shepherd's tail gave one small tentative thump against the kennel floor. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was the beginning of a promise. As Emily filled out the adoption forms, she glanced back at Max. His eyes were finally beginning to lose their haunted look. For the first time since she'd found him tied to that tree, she saw something like hope in them. The days melted together in a quiet rhythm of healing. Each morning, Emily would find Max a little stronger than the day before. His ribs still showed through his thinning coat, and his legs trembled when he stood for too long, but the hollow look in his eyes was slowly fading. She kept his bed by the fireplace, wrapped him in soft blankets, and hand-fed him small meals throughout the day. At first, he would only eat when she turned away, as if afraid the food might disappear. But gradually, he began taking treats directly from her palm, his wet nose brushing her fingers with tentative trust. Then came the evening that changed everything. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor beside him, reading aloud from a book just to fill the silence. The fire crackled softly, casting warm shadows across Max's face. She wasn't even paying attention when she felt it, the faintest movement against her leg. Looking down, she saw it, the slight, hesitant wag of his tail. Just one gentle thump against the floorboards, then another. A tear slipped down Emily's cheek as she carefully reached out. Max didn't flinch when her fingers touched his head. "You're going to be okay, Max," she whispered. And for the first time, she truly believed it. The firelight danced in his eyes as he looked up at her, no longer dull with pain, but bright with something that looked an awful lot like hope. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Where once stood a broken skeleton of a dog, now bounded a vibrant German shepherd with a glossy golden coat. Max's powerful muscles flexed as he raced through the fresh snow in Emily's backyard, kicking up sparkling flurries with each joyful leap. Emily leaned against the porch railing, her steaming mug forgotten as she watched him play. The same yard where he'd once hesitated to take 3 shaky steps now served as his personal playground. His deep, booming barks echoed through the winter air, each one a triumphant declaration of his newfound freedom. When he galloped back to her, his pink tongue lolling happily, Emily knelt to ruffle his thick fur. Max responded by planting 2 giant paws on her shoulders and covering her face in slobbery kisses, his entire body wiggling with excitement. As she laughed and wiped her cheek, Emily realized the icy road where they'd met felt like another lifetime ago. The rope burns around Max's neck had faded to faint scars, just as the memory of his suffering faded behind bright eyes full of devotion. Somewhere beyond the trees, church bells rang in the new year. Max tilted his head at the sound, then turned to lick Emily's hand as if to say, "This is our time now." And it was.